The Chariot. Atop Drogon, Daenerys rallies her Dothraki, finally deciding to cross the Narrow Sea and take the Seven Kingdoms. The Chariot card represents progress, victory, determination, and journey. But the reverse can mean someone is going to act recklessly, and chaos will ensue. And so it did for Daenerys Targaryen. But there is another Targaryen who took a reckless journey on a dragon that caused quite a bit of chaos. Princess Aerea was the daughter of King Jaehaerys I's older sister, Rhaena Targaryen. Aerea and her mother, Rhaena, had some issues with each other, and emotions were strong in both ladies. Just before Aerea's 13th birthday, she ran away from her mother's castle of Dragonstone. The girl who had never ridden a dragon before decided to pick Balerion, the Black Dread. Yes, Aegon the Conqueror's dragon during his reign. By this time, the Black Dread was old, incredibly willful, and very large. By the way, Balerion had been responsible for Aerea's dad's death. Well, the person controlling the dragon was technically responsible. Balerion was the weapon that killed her father. Of course, the Black Dread didn't listen to the young princess, who had no experience with dragons, and instead took her to Valyria, where he was born. But there is a reason Valyria is avoided, and sailors steer clear of it. The Valyrians had practiced dark arts, blood magic, and experimented with the flesh of beasts and men to make monsters in this place. We don't exactly know what happened to the Black Dread and the princess, or what they encountered there. But when the Black Dread finally returned with her to King's Landing more than a year later, she was clothed in rags and sickly thin, sliding from his back and collapsing. When a knight touched the princess, he could feel her fever through his armor, and when he picked her up, she shuddered and twisted in her arms like something was moving inside of her. The princess died begging for death as she was cooked from within, her flesh growing darker and darker until it cracked, and her eyes cooked within her skull until they burst. She finally died from the shock of being immersed in ice, and that's when the snake hands and the worms with faces burst from her flesh. Here are the exact words of how a maester that took care of her described what he experienced. "We have told the world that Princess Aerea died of a fever, and that is broadly true. But it was a fever such as I'd never seen before and hope to never see again. The girl was burning. Her skin was flushed and red, and when I laid my hand upon her brow to learn how hot she was, it was as if I had thrust it into a pot of boiling oil. There was scarce an ounce of her flesh upon her bones, so gaunt and starved did she appear. But we could observe certain swellings inside her, as her skin bulged out and then sunk down again, as if... No, not as if, for this was the truth of it. There were things inside her, living things, moving and twisting, mayhaps searching for a way out, and giving her such pain that even milk of the poppy gave her no surcease. We told the king, as we must surely tell her mother, that Aerea never spoke, but that is a lie. I pray that I shall soon forget some of the things she whispered through her cracked and bleeding lips. I cannot forget how oft she begged for death. All the master's arts were powerless against her fever, if indeed we can call such a horror by such a commonplace name. The simplest way to say it is that the poor child was cooking from within, her flesh growing darker and darker, and then began to crack, until her skin resembled nothing so much, Seven save me, as pork cracklings. Thin tendrils of smoke issued from her mouth, her nose, even, most obscenely, from her nether lips. By then she had ceased to speak, though the things within her continued to move. Her very eyes cooked within her skull and finally burst, like two eggs left in a pot of boiling water for too long. I thought that was the most hideous thing I would ever see, but I was quickly disabused of that notion, for a worse horror was awaiting me. That came when Bennifer and I lowered the poor child into a tub and covered her with ice. The shock of the immersion stopped her heart at once, I tell myself. If so, that was a mercy, for that was when the things inside her came out. The things, mother have mercy, I do not know how to speak of them, but they were worms with faces. Snakes with hands, twisting, slimy, unspeakable things that seemed to writhe and pulse and squirm as they came bursting from her flesh. Some were no bigger than my little finger, but one at least was as long as my arm. O warrior, protect me. The sounds they made. They died, though. I must remember that, cling to that. Whatever they might have been, they were creatures of heat and fire, and they did not love the ice, oh no. One after another they thrashed and died before my eyes, thank the seven. I will not presume to give them names. They were horrors.